Welcome to the Southern Report once again. Thank you so much for giving me your time and the privilege of that. We're going to jump straight in. I'm going to bring on my dear friend John Haller. We are on the eve of the presidential election, and there are a number of things that need to be said just before John goes about his busy day and busy life. John, good to see you. Thank you for spending some time with me yet again, my friend. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, it's always good to be with you, Mark.
Presidential election. Let's dive into it.
I heard something about that.
Right, I think, yeah, there's a rumor. We're on the eve. I understand that many people, including yourself, have voted early. There's been a big Republican push in that regard. There's been a lot of early voting on the Republican side, which is maybe different to other years. John, how are you feeling on the eve of this election? There are polls coming out. What do we believe? There's rallying right up to the last minute. What are your thoughts? Because I know there's a lot of things on your mind.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I believe the polls because they're changing by the moment. And I think there's a lot of people have sort of reached the point where they just don't want anything to do with pollsters and politicians. And I'm sure it's better now than it used to be. Ohio used to be one of the most important swing states. I live in Ohio. And I live in a conservative, sort of a bellwether conservative county, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And we used to be inundated with ads, but now I guess that Pennsylvania is one of the big swing states, and I guess they're running more ads in Pittsburgh right now than they've ever run in history. I grew up part of my life around the Pittsburgh area, and so I'm grateful to the Lord that I don't live there. I never settled in Pittsburgh. It was bad enough here in Ohio, and even this morning, I must have 20 texts from different phone numbers. I keep blocking them, asking for money, participate in this poll, that poll. And it's really unbelievable. So the estimates are that at least 40% of people who are going to vote in this election have voted. I'm heading to California today. I'm doing some speaking this week. I'll be at, if people want to catch it, it'll be live on the YouTube channel and the app of Calvary Chapel of the Harbor in Huntington Beach. Pastor Joe Pettick and Tom Hughes and I will be doing something tomorrow night. We're not sure what we're going to title it. My update yesterday, which seems I don't pay that much attention to the numbers anymore, but I could just tell that I had a tremendous amount of engagement, much more so than usual on that particular update. I titled it, "Are we on or past the brink?" And so I have some concerns about what's going to happen on many levels. It's just not president, it's Congress and Senate, it's local elections. If I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not what do they say? I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet. I'm a nonprofit organization. And I really don't know what's going to happen. It's very difficult to gauge how everything is. There is tremendous angst in parts of the Christian community over Donald Trump. And I understand that there's some issues that he's sort of, for lack of a better term, seems to have caved on because of the political winds. One of those would be the issue of abortion. We'll give President Trump credit. So this raises several issues, sort of converge on this particular issue. Trump did appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. If you remember at the end of the Obama administration, he was trying to appoint Merrick Garland, who's now the Attorney General, as a Supreme Court justice. And the Republicans stood up to that and said, no, we control the Senate. He's not acceptable to us. We're not going to do this in the last year of your term. Because of the way our Constitution works, when you are in your second term, you're a lame duck. You can't serve anymore. So people will resist what you're doing. So they resisted that on Merrick Garland, praise the Lord, because I shuddered to think what things would be like if he had been in charge or he had been put on the Supreme Court for life with no chance of ever getting him off. So Trump put 3 justices in. They've been disappointing in some cases. Right now, if you can kind of put there's 3 really good, solid conservative justices: Gorsuch, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. They're solid constitutionalists, good interpreters of the Constitution. They believe in it, and they don't put up with the garbage. Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh are a little bit wishy-washy on some things. I don't understand their thinking sometimes, but I would say they're sort of constitutionalist. And then John Roberts is a middle of the road guy who you can't figure out what he's going to do. He'll do something. He'll be very political, but in terms of a constitutionalist perspective that we would like to see, it's 6-3 on the Supreme Court. The other justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's she's a left-wing lunatic. Oh, she did vote the right way, I think, on a case in the recent past, which surprised everybody because she voted. I mean, somebody once, I can't remember the exact case, but it was a pretty easy case. It was a very significant case. It might have been on the administrative law issue. And Amy Coney Barrett voted with the left wingers. And somebody said, Amy Coney Barrett, you ought to, if you're looking down the row of people sitting next to you on the Supreme Court, and Ketanji Brown Jackson is with Alito and Jackson or Thomas and Gorsuch, you got to question whether you should even be on the court. That way.
Right.
So they were able to overturn Roe versus Wade. It was a terrible decision when it came out in 1973. It allowed, and it never, that and some follow-on cases, the Casey case, I think it was Casey, Pennsylvania case, that allowed essentially unrestricted abortion.
Yeah.
And any challenges, any attempts to restrict abortion were almost immediately struck down by the lower courts. But that changed, but it didn't stop abortion. All it did was it says the individual states, in the way we're organized, will have the say. But what's happened since that election is that the Democrats and the leftists have seized on that, and it's very popular with women. I did a panel during the Senate election in 2022 on Fox News. And I don't know how to say this without sounding incredibly sexist or cruel or non-Christian. So I'll give it a shot. There's a lady, she was on the panel. So, Fox will do that sort of faux, we're evenly divided. So they'll have 6 liberals and 6 conservatives on a panel. So I was one of the conservatives, obviously, and this lady was a liberal, and she lived just like a neighborhood away from where I live in a suburb of Columbus. And she was, the first thing she harped on in that debate, this was over whether J.D. Vance, now the vice presidential candidate, or Tim Ryan would be the U.S. senator from Ohio. Vance won, but she was like, oh, abortion. And I'm looking at her, it's like, lady, with all due respect, you're 62. You ain't getting pregnant. You know what I mean? You're sort of like Sarah in the Bible. You're beyond your years and you're not thinking this through. But it was a very big issue. And it was something that And so it has swung some elections, and the Democrats and women and everybody are really seizing on it to get that, to use that in this particular election. Now, that raises one of the big issues. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. So I was a trial lawyer, and so as a trial lawyer, you are constantly running different scenarios through your head. If I do this, this might impact my case. If I do that, it will impact my case another way, and I'll have to bring in these people to testify. I'll have to put this evidence in. And so as a lawyer, you're always running through these scenarios in your mind. You're almost like a pathologist. You're very good at determining what people are doing wrong. So the question is, what happens if Kamala Harris wins and the Democrats get control of the House, which is a razor thin margin right now for the Republicans anyway, and the Senate, which is a razor thin margin for the Democrats. I mean, Kamala Harris has had to cast the vote in her role as the vice president, the tie-breaking vote, because it's been a lot of 50-50 votes. We're incredibly divided. So I don't know that there's going to be I just don't see a landslide happening, and that's assuming that all of the election procedures are followed. There's been some litigation about that, but let's just do sort of the worst case scenario. Kamala Harris wins. The Democrats take control of the House, and the Democrats take control of the Senate. Now, under our Constitution, the Senate, there's some things that the Senate does. They have to have a 2/3 majority. Nobody's getting a 2/3 majority. That's not going to happen. In fact, more Democrat-controlled seats are up for election in this particular cycle. They're on a 6-year cycle, so it's like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So 1/3 of the senators run every 2 years for election for 6 years. And so this year it's more Democrat. I think it's like 20 or 21 Democrats seats are up for election, 13 Republicans. Some of those are safe, some of those are not safe, and we're incredibly divided. So I think it's too close to call on many of these cases. But let's say the Democrats get a 52 seat majority, and let's say they get enough to control the House. Let's say they get 218 or 220. They flip the House. Mark, I'm telling you that you're going to see an onslaught against conservatives and constitutionalists unlike anything we've ever seen. One of the first things that they're going to do is they're going to pack the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is not well, they're going to do a number of things. The Supreme Court is not set. The size of the Supreme Court is set by statute. It's not set by the Constitution, and people are supposed to be appointed for life. They're going to pack the court. They're going to change what is a 6-3 conservative majority. They will put 4 Supreme Court justices in there. They'll be appointed by Kamala Harris, approved by the Senate. They're going to be lunatics, leftist lunatics, and that will change the majority on the Supreme Court, assuming everybody would vote the right way, from 6-3 sort of conservative to 7-6, blow the whole thing up. That's probably number one. And there's about a 2-week, this from your research and the great work you've done on J6, that there's about a 2-week gap between the seating of the new Congress, the counting of the electoral votes for president, and the president being sworn in on January 20th. And I think this year that will also occur on January 6th because of the leap year. I think that's the date. So what would happen that day is the new Congress would come in, be sworn in. Democrats would control both houses of Congress. They would control, they would have the majority leader. They would have the vice president who serves as the president pro tem of the Senate. They would have the House. They would have the Speaker of the House. They would control the legislative calendar for at least the next 2 years. This is a frightening, under the circumstances, this is a nightmare. So one of the things they'll do is they will pack the court. Some congressmen, some that were on the J6 committee, like Jamie Raskin from California, who is just a complete insane leftist who is, in my view, he is corrupt beyond what Liz Cheney is corrupt. He is already there. There's rumors and pretty good facts on the ground in DC that they will put in articles of impeachment against the president. So before Trump is sworn in, if they control both houses, well, they just need to control the House of Representatives. They will put in articles of impeachment. My understanding is they have already been drafted. So Trump won't even be in office yet, and there will already be an onslaught against him for an impeachment. But it will not stop there, Mark. It will also continue on. For example, there has been a concerted effort to taint Alito and Thomas with some of the Supreme Court justices. They pretty much make up their own ethical rules, and they've taken vacations with donors and that type of things. I don't know that it's impacted anything that they've done, and the Democratic leftists on the court do it as well, because these guys, they don't make near the money that they could make in a DC law firm. I mean, it's or in private academia and that type of thing. They could make a lot more money. So they write books and they do speeches and that type of thing. And so they're going to go after Justice Thomas to get rid of him. And I'm trying to think how old he is now. He's got to be late 70s or 80. How much fight does he have in him to sit there and fight it? And maybe he just resigns, and then she would get to appoint yet another Supreme Court justice. And Alito's getting up there as well. So they'll go after, they'll try to impeach Thomas. And they'll do it in such a way they'll also then try to force Thomas or Alito to recuse themselves in any cases that might come up to the Supreme Court that challenge aspects of this current election. Do you see how the game gets a little bit rigged?
Rigged.
It gets rigged beyond any recognition. So that's I guess that's kind of technical, geeky stuff, but that's a practical reality that we live in right now. And they'll go after that. The other thing that will happen, so let's say that the others, and there's probably another things that we're going to go on. And by the way, the assault on constitutional rights like Second Amendment rights and First Amendment rights, free speech, right to bear arms, which are sort of sacrosanct in the conservative community, those things will be attacked like you would not believe. I mean, there's a lot of statements from Kamala Harris herself, from people like Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, that, the First Amendment is problematic in the day of social media when common people can actually exercise their right of free speech and post something on social media. And so we have to control this disinformation. That's going to be done in concert with like-minded people across the pond, as we like to say, in Europe, in the UK. where I think that what I would call the letter agencies, like the CIA, MI6 or whatever the number is over there, and other security agencies they'll do the bidding. For example, the CIA or Homeland Security or Department of National Intelligence here in the United States, in our security apparatus, they want to spy on Americans, but they're prohibited from doing that by law in the Constitution. So what they'll do is they get the MI6 guys to do it, or they get the EU agencies to do it,
which they have in the past, which Obama has done in the past to spy on when Merkel was Chancellor. The Five Eyes, they have done that in the past,
right? And so then the wink wink nod nod part of that agreement is when you guys need your people looked on, because in today's day and age with data and border, there are no borders.
No.
So we'll hoover up all of the data. They hoover up all of our data anyway, with these massive computers. And I've talked about these we have these giant server farms around us, but they're all over the place. I think Google has like 28 of these, but I'll give you an example. Amazon came in here. Intel's building a big chip plant. Intel's had a little bit of problems with their stock price and everything. So they partnered with Amazon to help out on the chip plant. But in addition to that, Amazon has announced that they're going to spend, I believe the number I saw was $18 billion constructing server farms and facilities here in Central Ohio.
Wow.
I mean, I did a thing in my update yesterday about the Royal Clock Tower in Mecca that the Saudis had built. At the time it was built, it was going to be the tallest building on the planet. It's represented to be a giant minaret, but that thing cost $16 billion to build. It was one of the most, if not the most expensive building ever. And so here we have in Central Ohio, Google has spent close to $10 billion. Facebook is spent in the $6-7 billion range. Amazon's already spent about $8 or $9 billion. They're going to spend another $18 billion. You understand the scope of what they're building here. And then the first phase of this chip plant is supposed to be $25 billion with plans to do $100 billion of construction. So the economy is actually pretty good here in Central Ohio. And it's sort of propping up the whole state at this point. It's pretty unbelievable. So anyway, they'll take all that data and, it's just shared among all the big agencies around the world, and it's done for control. And so you'll see back during what I call the Charlie Vector 019er days, there were these NGO organizations that were set up, and they were essentially set up in the UK to take care of Canada and the US in consulting and controlling information and what they call disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. And there are these think tanks, and you can, the funny thing is you can get online and you can spend within a couple hours, you can kind of pull everything together as to how they're all working together. And they put out these lovely PDF publications about what they're doing, how they're analyzing data, but then they're using that data to control, for example, the way you do searches on Google. And then there's a web out, by the way, there's a web archive out there called archive.org. And it's been up and down a lot over the last month. And I'm not so sure that that's not been done intentionally to kind of control finding historical information about what did Kamala Harris really say back when she wasn't trying to fake everybody out. And the interesting thing is she still tried to fake everybody out. For example, in Michigan, have you seen this? She ran ads that essentially said, I support, it's just terrible what's happening in Gaza, what Israel's doing to Gaza. because Michigan has a huge Muslim population, and we call the city of Dearbornistan for obvious reasons. If you've ever been there, it's unbelievable.
I'll throw this out just quickly. Is Dearborn? Did Henry Ford have a factory there?
Yeah, that was the headquarters of Ford Motor Company. It was in Detroit, but they had their proving grounds, their testing facility, and then Henry Ford, who was, by the way, a horrible Jew hater.
Absolutely,
and eugenicist and all of that stuff.
And then he financed the Protocols of Zion reprint, or etc., or printed sections of that. The reason I say it, when we're talking about the spiritual battle in Ephesians 6, we're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. That is a principality that has taken root there a number of years ago, and then look at what's happening. I'm just throwing that out.
Well, and Henry Ford did a big head fake too, because I've been there. I mean, we actually I think one of our first, after we finally had some money to do things after law school and graduate school and that type of thing, we went up to Dearborn because he built this. There's a Henry Ford Museum, is a phenomenal museum of American industrial development. Washing machines and that type of thing, just incredible things. And then he also has this place called Greenfield Village, which is sort of like an Americana frozen in time, like historical buildings from the development of America, like the courthouse that Abraham Lincoln, he actually bought the courthouse, took it apart, and transported it to Dearborn and put it in this very lovely pastoral thing. And I actually think at one time, the first time I went there as a kid, the chair that Abraham Lincoln was sitting in when he was shot in Ford's Theater was actually there at Greenfield Village. I think it was later moved over to the museum, but I think the actual chair is there. And so it's like, so Henry Ford does this oh, look how Americana guy I am, and he's a Jew hater of the first rank. So it's an interesting juxtaposition. So let's go back. So we've talked about the nightmare scenario if the Democrats win the major election issues. They get the House, they get the Senate, and they get the presidency. Let's say Donald Trump wins, and the Democrats get the House and the Republicans get the Senate. I don't know that solves the problem. Now, the Senate won't. And the other thing, by the way, that will happen if the Democrats get everything is the District of Columbia, which is sort of it's not a state. It's a administrative district. It will become a state. That will give them 2 senators and a congressperson. Puerto Rico will become a state. Those will be that would be 4 Democratic senators. And making a place like that a state it only requires a simple majority. It's done by statute, and it's almost impossible to overturn in the future. So, for example, if you wanted to revoke California being a state, sort of giving them their wishes, they would. It would be a big problem. So that would be 4 Democratic seats in the Senate. So that would flip the Senate for a generation or 2, assuming the Lord doesn't put a stop to this soon. Let's hope that happens. So let's say that the scenario is Trump wins the presidency, the Democrats win the House, the Republicans win the Senate. The articles of impeachment will be fought. Whether they would require a 2/3 vote of the Senate to convict the president and remove him from office. But that won't stop them. It will be a constant stream of these impeachment things. They'll vote for the impeachment, And then and by the way, even if the Republicans get the House, there might be some Republicans like Liz Cheney, who will completely eviscerate everything that she's supposedly stood for in her life and vote with the Democrats. Even with a slim Republican majority in the House, the articles of impeachment could go through. And that would be true with Trump. That would be true with Clarence Thomas. That would be true with Samuel Alito and anybody else that they want to go after. And it's not so much, it's lawfare, which you are well aware of with the research that you've done. So that's that's a big concern. The only thing that would slow things down would be a Republican Senate. It would be hard for President Trump to enact his agenda, whatever he wants to do. He would be able to, I think, if I was the president, let's say I was President Trump for a day and I'm elected, I would say, listen, I've been sworn in. I've got work to do. Y'all go have a good time at the parade. I'm going back to the White House, and I would be signing stacks of documents to overturn all the executive orders of Joe Biden. And I'd be putting in my own executive orders at the same time to get things put back. Because what happened was, Obama did a lot of executive orders. Trump undid those and put his own in. Then Biden came in and wiped everything out the first day or two. And that's what needs to be done here. And then there's also the control of the federal bureaucracy, which will be very difficult for Trump to get control of. Let me give you an example of that. There's a lady, she's pro-Iranian. I can't remember her name. She was in this. She's very well documented. Her asking her Iranian handlers how I should handle something. Well, there was a massive leak of top secret documents recently related to possible Israel attacks. And she's one of the main suspects in that. She was just moved over to another position in the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or security apparatus. And my concern is that they're starting to do what they did at the end of the Obama administration. So each president gets to appoint about 3,500 political appointees that have to be approved by the Senate. In the case of President Trump, if it's a Democratic Senate, by the way, so let's say President Trump wins, it's a Democratic Senate, he has to get all those people confirmed by the Senate. They'll slow walk that like you would not believe, which leaves the other people sort of in place as acting directors, or that Trump could appoint some acting directors, but it's a huge mess. But then somebody like this Iranian supporter person who may have leaked these documents, I don't think it's still a certain thing. The FBI is investigating, so we're all very sure that the FBI is just going to do the right thing in this particular case, unlike what they've done for the last 12 years or 15 years. But she may have been moved over to a protected position. Protected position being a position that you can't fire her. And so what happened at the end of the Obama administration in 2016, a couple thousand political appointees were moved into different positions in the federal bureaucracy where you can't, it's almost impossible to fire them. And so you're going to see that on an epic scale as we do that. Now, the next question would be, what happens if the Republicans win the House, they win the Senate, and they win the presidency? I would say, watch out. That might be the worst situation of all for the next 75 days, because they have control of the Senate. There are Republicans that don't like Trump in the House, and they might push legislation through, executive orders, lame duck things. And so I think, as someone who's a big supporter of Israel, as you know, you're going to see a repeat of the transition from Obama to Trump. If you remember, it was Christmas Day or Christmas Eve in 2016. There was a very pro-Palestinian issue that a resolution that came to the UN Security Council, and for the first time in the existence of the UN, the United States refused to exercise its right to veto that document, and it went through and it passed. That was Resolution 2334. You're going to see that happen again, because you think these guys are going to work to do anything against the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, and the nonsense that's going on there with that lunatic UK lawyer that heads up the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, the Muslim guy, who's now under investigation for sexual harassment. And by the way, when he was told about harassment charges, this is what we're dealing with. This evil slime ball. Okay. His comment was, are the charges being made by a man or a woman?
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Who, in what universe is that even a proper question to ask in response to this? So,
and then his wife comes out to start defending him and various other things that start.
Well, isn't his brother in prison for molesting a 15-year-old or something?
Yep, absolutely.
And now, are we allowed to talk about that in the UK these days?
Well, it did. It was mentioned by Caroline Glick, so I suppose you could be right. And dear Caroline being in Israel, maybe she's the only one that's ever talk about it, and then I'm talking to you in America. But no, it hasn't come up on the radar. A bit like seems that George Clooney and his wife, she espouses to be this great lawyer, have also disappeared a little bit as well. But maybe.
Well, I think that the P. Diddy investigation has got a lot of people sort of hunkering down a bit.
I think you're right. I think you are absolutely right.
So what we need to do is we need to get Natasha Hausdorff out there all the time talking. So I'm trying to get an interview with her. Pray that comes together.
Well, I will pray that.
Killer.
I will pray that. Natasha is doing something in a few days' time, chairing a meeting in regard to exposing UNRWA, etc., and all the funding of that.
Yeah, that's next Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. I have signed up for the Zoom
I hope
meeting.
To be there. I hope to be there too. But sorry, John. Please continue, because what you're saying is.
Have I depressed you enough, Mark? That you're
well. To be frank with you, as someone very close to me would say, maybe even more. No, I'm not. I am. If I'm honest, John, I'm climbing the walls because, you can see the American Gulag book behind me. I'm climbing the walls where I just think, where has the interest been in what happened on Jan 6 a number of years ago? Do people understand what the ramifications of that are for America? Do Christians really understand what is going on? Do they care? The rumor that 40% of the EV group, the evangelical group or whatever, or other Christian groups may decide that they don't want to vote. Then we're dealing with the Tim Keller-esque, I know the guy's dead now, but this whole thing of espousing whatever, steering the church in the wrong direction, Soros funding sort of Baptist links, etc., etc. I could go on, and then we've got that dreadful paper Christianity Today, so left wing. Then you've got groups, Christians supporting Harris,
evangelicals for Harris.
Evangelicals for Harris, and then
you have New York Times columnists like David French, who claims to be a evangelical, but a pastor once said, I'm tired of running into feminized men in the United States. But enough about David French.
And that's about David French. But this is the issue, and I suppose I'm out, and that's why it's so wonderful to talk to you on the eve of this, because even today I feel as though I've been screaming and screaming and screaming and going, please remember the rest of us outside America, please vote and do the right thing. And then, of course, then there's this debate. People go, yes, it's about preaching the gospel. Of course it's about preaching the gospel. That's number one thing, but it's about action. And you've got to get involved in your communities. And of course, you have this, as we do, but maybe in a different way. Whereas this whole, and your culture is very different to ours, but this whole thing of getting involved in the school boards. And of course, people did a few years ago, and then the FBI come in and arrest you for the fact that you are a Christian, you are a conservative, and you are a patriot, and the rest is history. But I'm shouting and screaming. I'm concerned. Do people know what is going on, what potentially going on in the way that you have laid out? I don't want to see a civil war, but it's as though the other side want to. The other side want to push into violence.
John, look, Mark, every time they accuse you of something like not accepting the election or something, it's they're saying this is what we're doing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So it's so that's concerning now. So you have what would be a totally lame duck O'Biden, I call it O'Biden for a reason, O'Biden presidency that has 75 days to lock in their agenda. And if you think that they haven't war gamed this or made decisions about this or anything, you are incredibly naive. I mean, on an epic scale. So the other thing that they will do, so particularly right now, so Jamie Dimon came out last week and he said, we need to stop talking about being on the brink of World War III. We're in World War III. I mean, look at all the things that are going on around the globe. We have a person who's not competent in the office of presidency. He's not running anything. The question is, who's running it? And there's this apparatus. And if you don't think they haven't war gamed the scenario of what happens if they do lose the elections, they lose the House, they lose the Senate, they lose the presidency. They've been making plans for a very long time about what they're going to do to embed what their agenda is throughout every level of government that they possibly can.
And the answer to that, John, could be, that's why they may be confident in the fact that they've got such an appalling candidate in Harris and in Tim Walsh. And they can just sit back and go, well, we're going to cause chaos anyway, because we've got people inside established government. Just to give you, because I know you're busy. We're 43 minutes in, sir. So if you're okay for time,
we can finish out the time.
Okay, brilliant. But John, that may be why they've done that, because they feel so cocky and cocksure of themselves.
It could very well be. So that the other thing. So in the midst of this war that we're in the Middle East. So when you talk to your friends, and I mean, I have a red alert app on my phone. It drains my phone battery. I don't even have it set to anything other than buzz, because it goes off all the time. Buzz, 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 buzz. With these attacks by Hezbollah, Iran's threatening a massive attack, and they're going to come from Iraq. They're going to come from Yemen. They're going to come from Syria. Against Israel. And I believe Carolyn tweeted, I think she tweeted last night that one of the reasons that a number of Israeli soldiers have been killed in the operation that they're doing in southern Lebanon right now is because they don't have bullets to defend themselves. Because the United States is slow walking the supply. We're slow walking the supply of missile defense stuff, of ammunition, and that type of thing. So we make a big show. Oh, look, we got the B-52 Stratofortress bombers over there, and we're helping out Israel and all this stuff. But it's all a big, fat, fake show. And the the truth is, what are they actually doing on the ground to help out our ally Israel? And so what's going to happen to Israel in the 75 days if the Republicans gain control of everything?
Absolutely.
Because then there's no reason for them to hide and pretend that they support Israel to get Jewish votes. The true nature of them will come out. And so, this is existential threat stuff that we're talking about for Israel, for the United States. But also say, Mark, what I see what's going on in the UK, and I read about this, and I just scratch my head because I see all the people who have been imprisoned. And lawfare works not because you're guilty, but you plead guilty because that's the way to maybe protect your family from total, complete bankruptcy and annihilation economically. And so we have the things with, the one killing that took place of the 3 young girls. And now it's coming out that a lot of things that people were tweeting about are exactly true. And they knew this all along. And these people are now languishing in prison. They might have gotten one thing wrong, that he was a recent immigrant. Okay.
You're absolutely right. And let's link it up again. Jan 6, excuse me. Don't think that the Democratic Party don't have a relationship with the British Labour Party, because they do. If the Chancellor of the Exchequer is over there going, I think Janet Yellen is wonderful, and I follow her policies. And then there's pictures of her outside Washington. There is others. There is relationships. And of course, there was a model that they've learned of. Let's remember what the FBI was giving the help to the Trudeau government in regard to the Canadian convoy. Now let's remember what Australia has been trying to push forward in regard to controlling free speech on the internet, misinformation, blah, blah, blah. Just believe that what we put out is the right thing. Remember what Jacinda Ardern did when she was leader of New Zealand, head of New Zealand. This is all coordinated, and you said it. There is a link between all those countries, and it's called the Five Eyes.
Right. And then you have also the big organizations like the World Economic Forum and that type of thing that sort of give we're just getting around talking about some ideas veneer to the stuff that's really going on in the background.
Well, absolutely. And when our Prime Minister is asked Westminster or Davos, and he says Davos, we've just elected a new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch's mentor is a gentleman called Michael Gove. Michael Gove, there is a long history there that you and I another day can talk about, e.g. what is actually going on and the manipulation be behind the scenes, and also the control again of our media that is going on. And it all reflects, we have to say, from Jan 6, what are people learning? And the big thing that Tony Blair put in place, John, all those years ago, was to create bodies where it controlled things of our society outside Parliament. Parliament devolved things to things like Ofcom, etc., in charge of our media. So that's where we've reached, mate. It's not good, and there are parallels. And I suppose I'm screaming, going, but I'm praying that Americans are taking their responsibility seriously, because it affects the whole world. We've seen it. I'm saying the obvious. I mean, other people of course, are saying it, but it does exasperate me.
So I sometimes feel like I should just sit here and comment on the live stream the end times, because I'm a Bible prophecy guy, and I do think look, I think that there are certain people that are coming to the fore. I do think, and I'm been trying to get Carolyn Glick nailed down. Whether that happens or not, I still think everybody should listen to her. And the one thing I would say to her is I followed her for a long time. She was we were both much younger when I started following her, because what she said resonated with me, and I found it to be truthful. I found her to be bold. But what I would say to her right now is, Caroline, this is your moment. All of the work that you have done in your career have prepared you to be here to help us understand what's going on. And I would say the same thing to Natasha Hausdorff.
Yes.
That Natasha, this is your moment.
Yep.
And I will say that both of them are shining brightly in this moment. And I think they're stepping up and they're doing what needs to be done. And I just pray that, you and I can sort of contribute to that, to this giant spiritual conflict that we're wrapped up in. It is, my dad was a pastor, a Bible prophecy guy, and I keep thinking, like, what would he be doing if he was here right now? And I think he would be doing what I'm doing, to be honest with you, because he was very much aware. I mean, we got numerous newspapers, news magazines, all that stuff. He passed away before the internet really had come into fruition, but I'm sure he would use it. So,
all I can say, John,
fastest typist I've ever seen in my life, by the way.
Yeah.
So he would be on a keyboard someplace pounding away.
But he's trained you well. He's trained you well to use the new tools and the modern tools that are available. And of course, he would have been. We can sit here in our rooms and we can communicate, as someone pointed out today. But in his time and earlier in his time, he would have had to get on a plane. He would have had to drive. He would have had to preached at this church, preached at that church, preached at that conference more. Where on the internet, it gives us the access to be able to do that. And
I will be in California tomorrow night,
absolutely.
7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 o'clock Eastern, Calvary Chapel, the Harbor. I think that's the time. And I'm going to do a conference with Tom Hughes and about 15 other guys, Eric Stackelback, and guys like that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Temecula, California. It's being put on by Hope for Our Times. That's Tom Hughes' ministry, but it's being called the End of the World Conference. And so I told Tom, we're going to sort of give maybe an End of America preview tomorrow night in Temecula, in Huntington Beach.
Well, it sounds amazing, and I'll either try and send me the link, or I'll find the link so I can put in the show notes if we've got time, or I can add them to you later. But I think that's brilliant. And John, we have to play our part, as much as at times I'm going, what is that? But we have to play our part. And I totally agree with you in, thanking God for people like Caroline Glick, definitely, and Natasha on this side of the pond as well, because they are doing an incredible job, an amazing job.
Yeah. So I've been sort of developing this, I try to bring a little humor to the situation if I can. And I don't know if I can. I've put this. I have a thing there, a graphic that I've made up. I don't know if you can put it into the thing. There you go. It's sort of my wheel of prophecy. Just take a spin, and that's how you'll talk about something in the end times. That's pick one of those topics and you'll have enough time to do it. And by the way, there's war all over the place. It's an incredibly significant time as we see these things. I believe that the topic of my talk will be at the appointed time. Because a lot of people say, well, why didn't this or that happen? You know, they had an opportunity to do this years ago or decades ago. And the simple answer may be it wasn't the appointed time.
Back and John, listen, I'll tell you what we do. And
Let me shut this. I'm going to hang up the WhatsApp.
Yeah, we'll hang up, but that's fine. But listen, we can end it now. I'm going to play us out. I'll play us out. But John, thank you.
Okay. I think somebody must have not liked us. So
no, I think you could be right, and I'm gonna check something. But John, thank you so much for your time, and as I say, have a safe flight. An incredible conference. I want to hear all about it, and or liaise with me, and we could do something while you're out there. That'd be amazing. Or on your way there, but I'll do that. But I'll play us out and say goodbye to you on the other side.
Yeah, I'll be back here a week from today.
Okay, brilliant.
All right. About midnight. So anyway, take care. Thanks so much.
And you. Don't worry.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.